Right. Okay. Great stuff. So we finish off talking about options and warrants. Um, so really, this an option is the right. It gives you the right or the option to buy something. So, for example, when you look at derivatives, when you spend time looking at derivatives, you're going to be looking at calls and puts and all these fancy terms that give you the right to buy something in advance at a certain price. So your hope is that if you have the right to buy something for £2 in the future, but the market price is five. Well, that's wonderful, right? You buy it for two. Someone is obliged to sell it to you for two. So someone has to go out into the market, pick it up for five, or if it's valued at five, and give it to you for two. So the other person is making a loss. You're quite all right. You buy it for two, and you can choose, do you hold on to it? Point is, you have something that's worth £5 that you bought for two. Truth is, you don't even need to have the two. The fact is that you just walk in and you get three because you technically could buy and sell in the very same minute, um, if you like. But point is, that's the point. The point is, how do we, for fairness, recognize what's happening here? So an option or warrant gives the holder the right to buy shares at some point in the future at a predetermined price. There is no cash at the time, if you like, that the option is exercised, and so it's just an option. So typically, options are could even be free. Well, they're minimal. They could really cost nothing. Almost, they could be very, very minimal in value. So cash doesn't enter it. We must allow for this. So the split, what's the split? So the total number of shares that would have been issued if the cash had been received has been used to buy the shares, and the remainder is treated like a bonus issue as having been received for no consideration. And I've written here that this is what I'll explain. The point here is that if it is likely that the options are going to be exercised, what you're having here is that you're exactly like the rights issue. What you've done is you have money coming in, right? Less money coming in for something that's actually of a higher value. So really and truly, I can actually work out the real full shares that are in question here. If you understand what I mean, you're bringing in money for, like I'm bringing in all this money in, but if I value it at the actual market value, you've brought in money at a lower amount per share. But if I can now compare it based on the actual market value, I can actually see what the number of real shares are, and I can compare that to the number of shares you actually issued, and I will see that some of them are free. I'll show you an example in a second. But if it is likely that the options will be exercised, it is similar to offering shares at a lower value than their market value. In other words, giving some shares at full price, which is then taken into consideration. But the assumption is that the free shares will be issued. The assumption is that the free shares will be issued at the date of payment. So when you finally have to pay for those shares. But in the meantime, there are some bonus issues that we must account for straight away. Let's look at this example. A company has 4 million shares currently in issue and issues some options for a further 1 million shares. So they issue 1 million shares, and this 1 million has some shares at full price, some full shares, and has some bonus shares, right? That's the same thing, exactly like we did for the rights issue. So during the year, what happens? The average fair value of one is $3. The average fair value of one is $3. I would go as far as calling this the well, doesn't matter. I would almost argue this was like a TERP, I imagine. It says fair value. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Key point is it's three. That's the value of a share. And the exercise price, so you're going to be receiving £2 for each of these shares. You have issued shares and you have issued them, given people this option to buy this piece of paper to buy each share for $2. So you're saying I'm happy to receive $2 for each share, almost like a rights issue. So what's going on here? You have $2 times 1 million, if you like, is what you're going to get. But we know really and truly that the fair value of each of these shares should have been $3. So in effect, what you've really done is 2 million divided by 3 is equal to 666 full shares. That's the real. I could just have issued 66666 full shares at $3 each, but you chose to issue 1 million, which means that therefore, that if you have issued 1 million and 666 of them are full shares, it means the difference of 334 are bonus shares. So fair enough, I accept that I'll recognize these market shares when we receive the money, but these bonus issues, the argument is that it should be recognized immediately. So I go from having 4 million shares to recognizing 4 million plus, if you like, my 0.333334 shares. So I have 4.333333 shares when I'm calculating my DEPS. So let's look at how they deal with it very quickly in the textbook, which is the same thing. I just want to show you what they have done in the text here. So you can see there, well, calculating the basic EPS is just literally whatever the 500,000 divided by the 4 million, no problem there. But with the options, you have this 500. So you have your basic 4 million and your options are 333. And how do you, well, they have a formula where you have the market average fair value minus the exercise price divided by that. It gives you, and multiplied by the number of shares. I actually think, I mean, it's up to you. I think the better you understand what's going on, the better. So you can sort of think of it, if you like, this way. This will help you with your rights issue discussion as well. And so you have 33333 there. And so you now, for the deep EPS, you're basically diluting that, and you have that 500,000 divided by 4.333, giving you 11.5. So why not? These are not bad questions. If you get them, please, we need to nail them, especially in section B. Right. Okay. So yeah, the EPS, the earnings per share, important ratio, because there's another secondary ratio, the price over earnings ratio, which is really like the price is what people are willing to pay for something, right? What the market is willing to pay. And so people like to look at this as people think, well, the whole idea is that the multiple of earnings, price as a multiple of earnings, the higher that is, the greater the willingness or the greater the value of that share, because that's what people believe is happening with that share. So that you have that P over E ratio. So market value per share or earnings per share is really looking at market value divided by earnings in effect, but we're looking at it on a share basis. So it's really important. But of course, EPS is almost subject to manipulation in that earnings are an accruals concept, aren't they? So I mean, it's fine, but it's it's really about trends. It's you're observing year on year what's going on with EPS. But it's popular. People look at it really to investigate the potential returns on in individual investments. Again, like I say, EPS does have potential limitations, but overall, it's not it's quite a good ratio for comparing one year to the next. Again, like I said here, the issue with EPS again is that you have share money coming in during the year and funding different projects. So it's about how do you balance this kind of weighted average number of shares, if you like, through the year. EPS again here, areas of judgment in terms of provisions and policy that's happening. You can manipulate the earnings if you wish to, by just deferring or delaying earnings or and recognizing certain earnings early, all of that. So again, really EPS, again, like I say, is it cannot be used as a basis of comparison between companies, as the number of shares in issue in a particular company is not related to the amount of capital employed. So typically, remember, this is saying earnings per share. Many companies might be funded, if you like, by debt, by a lot of debt. Some companies are funded not by by shares. So it's very difficult, if you like, to compare two different companies, because two companies may have the same amount of capital employed, but one company has 100,000 of shares and the other has 4.9 of reserves. And here you have another company that has 5 million of shares and different reserves. So the key point is that there's a potential for differences. So really, you can use EPS to compare between on the same company year on year to look at performance, if you like. And I've talked about the fact that you have accounting policies that could affect things. So EPS, hopefully, as you can start to see, there's potential for manipulation there. But overall, it is still a very popular ratio and used a lot. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the important thing. I think DPS is very good. It really gives signals, um, if you like, what could potentially happen. So it shows what the current EPS would be if all the dilutive potential ordinary shares have been converted. So in a way, it does serve as a warning to equity shareholders of what might happen in the future. Cool, great stuff. And that brings us to the end of this series on earnings per share.